Hi, I'm Kesenya, and thanks so much for joining me for this video all about Venus Retrograde 2020. What an interesting period this is going to be when we experience it next year in 2020. Well, today I'm actually dressed in green, which is considered to be by many the color associated with Venusian energy. So hopefully I can channel some Venus information and energy to us all today. I've also got my little butterfly on because Venus is connected to the sign of Taurus, which is nature, which is beauty. And of course, butterflies are beautiful and they're part of nature. So I'm trying to glean as much Venusian energy as I can for us all here today. So I thought I'd start by taking a little bit of a peek at what Venus actually represents. Now, in astronomy, not astrology, but in astronomy, the astronomy of the planet Venus, she's the only planet that can shine so brightly that she can cause shadows on Earth. Now, the moon does as a reflection of the sun's light. We know that happens. You can be out on a very strong moonlit night and see shadows and play of light that's actually quite beautiful. But the only planet that can do this is actually Venus, interestingly enough. And so sometimes she is just so bright in the sky. She's the brightest entity in the sky aside from the sun and moon. Sometimes she can be so bright that she causes shadows. That's only occasionally, but she can do it. One thing about Venus is that she rotates so slowly in the sky that she takes 234 Earth days to do one single rotation. As such, she actually has the slowest rotation of any planet in the whole solar system. And she is the hottest planet in the solar system. Even though Mercury is closer to the sun, due to the dense clouds of sulfur dioxide on planet Venus, any heat from the sun is trapped within those clouds and her thin atmosphere, causing the heat of the planet to be just so much hotter than Mercury, even though Mercury is in much closer proximity. So she is the hottest planet in the solar system as well. And of course, those of us who did our grade 5 astronomy lessons know that Venus sits as the second planet in the solar system, the second planet from the sun. You've got the sun, and then you've got Mercury, and then there's Venus, and then Earth. And she is considered also to be something of a sister planet to the Earth, as they're similar in size. So she's the nearest planet to Earth, and that's why she shines so brightly in the sky, not the star. Now, the mythology of Venus is also very interesting. The name Venus is the ancient Roman name for the goddess of love and beauty. In Greek, it was Aphrodite. So in Greco-Roman mythology, they share similar characteristics and similar qualities. So both Aphrodite and Venus, they governed fertility, romance, prosperity, and victory as well, interestingly. She was worshipped in many temples and many festivals all throughout Rome and as Aphrodite in Greece. And some people, including Julius Caesar, even considered her to be the ancestor of the Roman people. Of course, he'd attach himself to somebody as glorious as Aphrodite or Venus, wouldn't he? Now, some mythological legends say that Venus, was the daughter of the gods Zeus and Dione. There are some other legends, though, that say that she was birthed from the sea, not from a god itself, but birthed from the sea after Uranus was castrated by his son Saturn. So essentially, to get kind of gross here, hope you've got the M rating on this particular video, but Saturn castrated his father Kronos in mythology, otherwise known as Uranus, and from that castrated member that fell to Earth into the oceans of Gaia, the Earth, there arose out of the sea foam of that dismemberment the goddess Venus. So fascinating mythology there. I do want to talk a little more about the mythology of Venus, but at a later point where we look at her mythology around being the morning and the evening star. So I'm going to explore that for you. Stay tuned for a little bit later in the video for that aspect of her mythology. But in astrology, Venus tells us about our enjoyment of pleasurable and beautiful things. She tells us about our love relationships, our connections with others. The things we need to live a comfortable life are also seen from Venus in a tangible sense. You know, our shoes, our clothes, our food, our cars, our shelter, all those nice, lovely things that we like to acquire to make life more comfortable for us. So wherever Venus sits in our chart is going to tell us all about how we interact with these ideas: love, beauty, pleasure, possessions, things we need to support our journey through life, refinement, sophistication, and women as well, seen through Venus, particularly young women. So wherever Venus sits in the chart, whatever sign, is going to tell us a lot about the dynamic that we have with those elements. And I'll explore what that means in regard to this retrograde period we're going to come across shortly as well. Venus rules the sign of Taurus and Libra, and they're both very different signs, but they do, both of them carry a quality of beauty about them, a quality of pleasure, a quality of interaction and relationship. I'll compare the two of them for you just so that you know the great gamut of characteristics that Venus actually rules. Taurus is this very earthly, natural beauty. Taurus correlates to the natural realm of Earth, and so butterflies essentially, but also forests and, generally speaking, the things of nature like the animals and the flora, fauna, and, rivers and lakes and mountains and just the earth and being in nature is Venus in a general sense. Venus also correlates through Taurus to money, making money, the tangible things, like I said before, that we need to support our journey through life, like pleasurable things, yummy food, going out to a restaurant and eating at a lovely food, and clothing, shopping, beauty therapies, beauty treatments. These are seen through the sign of Taurus and Venus's rulership of the sign of Taurus. It's also self-love that we associate with the energy of Taurus as well. The ability to feel safe, to be secure, is seen through Taurus. Venus rules Libra as well. Now Libra, as opposed to Taurus's type of beauty, which is that natural, earthy kind of beauty, we might think something we want to touch, something we want to hug, something we want to be close to and be a part of even. We might even compare it to, say, the beauty of Marilyn Monroe, which, men wanted to hold her, women wanted to be her. There is this desirability factor with the beauty of Marilyn Monroe, very Taurian. Not so much natural, she was bleached blonde and everything, but she had that desirability, sensuality factor of Taurus. Libra, on the other hand, is more the Grace Kelly type of beauty. You just admire it. My God, it's breathtaking. Look how beautiful and elegant she is. That's Libran beauty. It's not so tactile. It's not so touch focused. It is more, let's say, adoration focused. So it's that kind of sophisticated, classic, refined beauty that we see through the sign of Libra, also ruled by Venus. Libra is also ruled by Venus, and it covers things like diplomacy, fairness, equality, making harmony and balance a priority. It's the peacemaker. It's like I said, harmonizing situations, harmonizing interactions between people. All these are seen through the sign of Libra, and Libra rules relationships. Not just the tactile, sensual, let's get down to the nitty-gritty kind of stuff of Taurus, but more the I love you, I'm committed to you, beyond the touch, taste, see, hear, and smell. I am in a love, intimacy bond with you, we see through the sign of Libra that Venus rules. It's also business partnerships. It's quite a business-oriented sign, Libra. And so it connects to those things as well. And our interactions with the other, anyone else, can be seen. Our relationships are seen through Libra, ruled by Venus. Now Venus is, if you want to use an archetypal image, she's like this beautiful goddess or a beautiful woman. She is a feminine energy, or an ancient goddess full of this wonderful self-love, because she is very, very connected to the idea of self-love. You must be in love with the self, and then you have something to offer others. All of us, even men, will have Venus in the chart somewhere. And because of this, we have Venus in our hearts. We have a love of beauty somewhere tucked away in us. We have a love of giving love and receiving love to some capacity within us. Venus Venus teaches us to love the beauty in other people, no matter what it looks like, how different it is to us. By really embodying the full self-love component of Venus, we learn to love the beauty in others, whatever that shape that takes, and we allow ourselves to be loved and to be uniquely beautiful as well when we fully embrace the energy and the beauty of Venus. Quite a fabulous, adorable little planet. So what does it mean if natally we happen to have Venus in a retrograde motion in our horoscope? So what is retrograde? Well, the retrograde motion is when it looks to those of us here on planet Earth like another planet out in the solar system is going backwards in the sky, is retracing its steps. That is retrograde. It's a backwards motion of a planet. Apparently, it's not really going backwards at all. It just looks like it is to us here on Earth. And you might use the illustration of two cars going down the freeway. One's going 80 k's an hour, the other's going 100 kilometers an hour. And for a moment, they're going neck and neck down the freeway. But eventually, the car going 100 kilometers an hour is going to move further past the retrograde planet, or the car doing 80 kilometers an hour. And it looks for that moment, a little brief period of time, as if the car doing 80 kilometers an hour is actually going backwards as it moves away from you and you move out in front. So retrograde is when we get this appearance of something going backwards, even though it's not. It's just that where one planet or one car is edging in front of the other, and it gives the appearance of to go backwards. And so when we're looking at a planet in the sky retrograde, that's what we're looking at. It appears to go backwards. It looks like it's going in reverse. But the old Hermetic saying, as above, so below, as without, so within, applies. When a planet to us here on Earth appears to go retrograde, and we are born with a retrograde Venus in our chart, it turns the energy of that planet, that love of beauty, that expression of beauty, that expression of self-love, that expression of pleasure and joy and delight, etc. It turns that inward instead of expressed outward. That's what retrograde motion is. It's when a planet is at its closest point to the Earth, when a planet is retrograde. And as such, its power is strong, but it's also focused inward rather than expressed outwardly. So this can result in maybe a feeling of unlovableness when we have Venus retrograde in our natal chart. Maybe we feel like we've never really been loved at all in our life, or that it's hard to achieve love. Sometimes there might have been even no real tangible world event in your lifetime that caused you to feel that way. It's just this sense that I am not loved, you know. Even if your parents showered love upon you, you can just have this innate sense of I am unlovable, which could actually be a karmic result, something you're working through with self-love, self-worth, and self-valuing, and even relationships on an evolutionary level with this planet of love and beauty. Every planet in evolutionary astrology correlates to a journey we're doing at an evolutionary level across many lifetimes with the nature of that planet. Mercury might be an evolutionary journey with the nature of our ability to speak and think and communicate. Mars might be an evolutionary journey with our sexuality. Venus is an evolutionary journey with relationships, self-love, and beauty. So, retrograde Venus can also cause blocks in our capacity to show affection to others due to fears of rejection. So we're instead of expressing affection outwardly, we've turned it inward in a sense that we're afraid to express it because of fear of this rejection of intimacy, of our intimacy. Can make us a very late bloomer with relationships. Everybody around us is falling in love and getting married and having kids, and here we are still single. What's going on? It could well be retrograde Venus has just not blossomed into capacity for us yet. Sometimes we can flip the self-love thing around to the other side of the coin and have a severe self-centeredness even. Not always, but this can be the case. But this is actually a defense against these feelings of being unlovable. We need a lot of reassurance when we've got Venus retrograde that we are, lovable. Tell me that you love me, confirm, show. We desire for it to be reaffirmed in us until we reach perhaps Venus maturation period at age 25, or get a little bit older and start to get a bit more mature and not so fragile with those sorts of things. Venus retrograde in the natal chart, we're talking here, it's not just about being unlovable, but feeling that we're unacceptable. So it's a really challenging thing to have in a chart, because as human beings, we're here on the planet desiring more than anything to have and give and receive love. And so there's a lot of pain often with this Venus retrograde placement in the chart. We can actually tend to look for love relationships from people who are really left of center. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we tend to seek out love and affection from very eccentric people. What we're doing here is seeking new modes of relating and trying to fit in. We're looking for a sense of belonging, and because we have this sense of I'm unacceptable, we tend to gravitate to people that society sees as unacceptable, not mainstream, in order to feel like we are belonging. I hope that makes sense. But because of this Venus retrograde, we then carry the ability to really help others who feel like they aren't belonging, like they don't fit in. Where's my place? I'm a square peg in a round hole kind of thing. We have that ability to help and assist them because we know what it feels like when we have Venus retrograde. We're actually, with Venus retrograde, a lot deeper about what we value in love relationships. So superficial things like, oh, you've got a hot ass, or, big tits, or whatever it happens to be that turns you on in a very superficial level, it's not going to really do it for a Venus retrograde person. They're going to look for inner, deeper qualities to attract them in relationships. We're not into shallow people at all when we have Venus retrograde. There are other signatures in the chart that indicate a lack of interest in shallow people and hanging around with shallow people, but this is one of them. And we will also perhaps be somewhat antisocial, or give the impression of being antisocial because of this, because we would rather be in a one-on-one conversation when we have Venus retrograde in the natal chart. We'd rather be chatting one-on-one with an in-depth conversation with somebody, rather than being in sort of the life of the party and look at me dancing on the tabletop with a lampshade on my head. That just is not Venus retrograde style at all. So for Venus retrograde people, their evolutionary soul intent is actually to heal a scar and a wound that exists relationally within them. This is part of their journey, part of their path, and depending on how well they do with healing that and giving the self-love and learning to care and nurture their own inner being, their inner beauty, their inner love nature, depending how well they do with that will depend how well life blossoms for them and love blossoms for them with people with Venus retrograde. It's also been seen that timing in relationships can be just a little bit off for people with Venus retrograde, and this is usually, we all know the people you meet, or have heard stories about the people who meet the man of their dreams, but you're just living in the wrong parts of the world and it doesn't happen. Or the man who meets the woman that he's always longed for, and somehow the parents keep them apart, or something that just doesn't work. The timing's off, the situations aren't supportive. Venus retrograde can indicate those sorts of relational experiences that don't quite gel as we long for them to. But I just want to say, if you have Venus retrograde, it's not all bad news, because eventually in your progress chart, Venus will turn direct. And when Venus turns direct, then you will notice that these retrograde qualities will lessen, they'll shift, you'll start to progress and move forward and sort of express more outwardly the nature of Venus. But you will have learned valuable lessons and healed this karmic wound, one would hope, by the time Venus turns direct, and you'll be able to then progress with a good relational capacity in life. The other thing is Venus maturation, as I mentioned earlier, at age 25. This is when Venus, as a human being, we start to really embrace and embody the nature of Venus in our souls. It is advised that men particularly, but also women, don't get married or commit to relationship. This is for everybody, not just retrograde Venus, but everybody, until after the age of 25 when Venus has matured, because we really don't know what we want in relationships until we have reached the Venusian or Venus maturation at that age. So, you can live with someone or you can be in a serious relationship. That's okay. But don't go putting a legalized ring on it or buying a house with someone or anything. Would be my advice. Take it or leave it until you are over 25 and really know what you want in relationships. So let me tell you all about this coming Venus retrograde period and give you some of the lowdown on what we're looking at here. Well, this year, 2020, is going to be a much stronger year for love for us all than 2019 was. So this is great, and this is because both Venus and Mars are going to be retrograde. Therefore, they are really exerting more of their influence of, in Venus's case, love, and in Mars's case, the desire, the passion, the sex. These things are going to have a longer period of influence because of the retrograde motion that we'll be experiencing with them this year. And both of them are going to be retrograde at different points throughout the year. So Venus in 2020 is going to go retrograde here in the sign of Gemini. There she is sitting up there. And she is actually going to be entering her shadow period on the 10th of April 2020. So what does this mean? Well, the shadow period, I'll explain in the light of what's going to occur on April the 10th, 2020. This is 5 degrees here. I'll write it on. 5 degrees. Oops, awkward writing there. 5 degrees of Gemini. At this time, on the 10th of April, that's my old wedding anniversary. How interesting is that? On the 10th of April, Venus, who's been in Taurus, is going to go chuff, 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 and hit 5 degrees of Gemini. That is the beginning of her, what we call shadow period. So I'll just leave her there for the moment. And then she's going to keep chuffing along through Gemini until she gets to 21 degrees, about here. I'll write that on, 21 degrees of Gemini. She's going to keep on moving, and on the 13th of May, she will hit 21 degrees. And it's when she gets to this point that she's going to go, hey, I think I need to stop for a minute here and go backwards. So it's at 21 degrees, she will do what's called stationing direct. She will station retrograde rather, and she will begin her journey backwards. And she's going to go back to 5 degrees. That is why this is the shadow period, because she's going to move across this period, this section of the sky that eventually in her retrograde motion she's going to return over. That's why it's called the shadow period. She's still going forwards at this point, and then she turns backwards and goes across this section of the sky. This is the shadow period. From the 10th of April, she will be in the shadow section. And then, as I said, the 13th of May, she will go backwards and start heading back to 5 degrees. And when she gets back to 5 degrees, it will be on the 25th of June, just checking my dates as I do this. On the 25th of June, she's going to be at 5 degrees of Gemini, and then she will station direct. She will turn and start going forward in motion again and move across here like this. So as you can see, if you happen to have any of your planets here, sitting here between 5 degrees Gemini and 21 degrees Gemini, you are going to get 3 hits of Venus. The first as she's going forward, the second as she's going back, and the third as she's going forward for the final time and then on and out and into the sign of Cancer. So you're going to get 3 hits of Venus to any planet you have that sits within 5 to 21 degrees here. If you happen to have the planet Venus sitting there, natally in your natal chart, it means you're going to have 3 Venus returns next year. That is quite impactful, and we'll talk about what that looks like for you in a minute if you happen to have Venus at this point. Now, the last time that Venus was retrograde in Gemini this way was back in May, June 2012, and before that in 2004. So I want you to think back to these points in time, 2012, and particularly May, June 2012 and 2004. What was happening in your love life? What was going on in your with beauty, with love, with self-love at this time? What was happening in your world connected to all those Venusian things? You're going to get a repeat of those themes this time around, because those were the last two times that we had a retrograde of Venus in the sign of Gemini. So let's explore the Venus return. When we have Venus sitting here natally and our transiting Venus, which is what we're looking at here with the retrograde next year, transiting Venus is going to move across our natal Venus. So to have a Venus return, well, the Venus return, it happens pretty much annually for most people, but it's going to happen 3 times for you guys with Venus between 5 and 21 degrees of Gemini. It's going to give clues to your future with love at this time on those dates that I shared. Basically, between the 10th of April right up until the 25th of June, you're going to experience clues, hints as to the future of your love life, your future you're going to have with affection, with possessions, with beauty, with aesthetics. Get that word out. You might feel when you have Venus retrograde more like shopping, because Venus has to do with wanting to have possessions and things, pampering yourself, indulging in romance, taking in more pleasure and joy, doing more pleasurable things, acquiring more shoes or more art or whatever your interest happens to be in the realms of beauty, getting your nails done, doing those very beautiful things. You're going to be much more drawn to doing those things, and it's actually really good to do some of these things when Venus is you're having a Venus return while Venus is moving direct. So for example, that period from the 10th of April through to the 13th of May, that is going to be a really good time for you to do your any of those kind of nice things, shopping, nails, and sort of invest in those sorts of things. Because when you have Venus return, you want to do something beautiful on your Venus return day. To know about this particular, you're going to have to know where exactly your natal Venus falls, and then what day it's going to be between the 10th of April and the 13th of May that Venus is going to cross that point. And make sure you do something beautiful, something joyful, something loving, something romantic on that day to set you up, to give you the tone for your year ahead with love and affection and pleasure and possessions and so forth. Essentially, when we have Venus return, which happens once a year, what we want to do is make sure that everything in our life is beautiful Venusian energy. And that is then going to set the imprint for our Venus experiences in the year ahead. So that's why we do the beauty therapy and have a nice dinner at a restaurant or something. So between as I said, the 10th of April and the 13th of May, that's when you want to, the day in that section where Venus hits your natal Venus and you have a Venus return, that's when you're going to want to set something up to enjoy like that. Then let things be for a while as Venus turns retrograde and goes back. That's going to happen from the 13th of May to the 25th of June. And then after the 25th of June, keep an eye on where Venus is in the sky. And when she hits that Venus return point again for the 3rd time, then you also want to do something beautiful. So 2 chances out of 3 to establish the tone for your Venusian relationships, love, self-love, pleasures and joy for the year ahead. So I probably haven't explained that with as much clarity as I would have liked to. I do hope it makes sense. When we have our Venus return, just to quickly reiterate, when we have our Venus return, it is all about setting the tone for what is to come, setting intentions for what is to come with regard to the Venusian things for the year ahead for us. And you get 2 chances to do that while Venus is direct. And there'll be one chance that you want to ignore that hit when Venus is going retrograde. And I'll explain why we ignore it when Venus is retrograde. When Venus is retrograde, we don't want to start new love. We do when Venus is direct because it indicates forward motion, momentum, and potential with a new love when Venus is direct. But when Venus is retrograde, essentially from that 13th of May through to the 25th of June, we don't want to start new love. We don't want to hook up with anyone from the past. We can have a tendency to make impulsive choices. We should avoid cosmetic surgery or any changes to self, like a new haircut. Don't get married. For God's sake, don't get married during Venus retrograde, because whatever you do, you'll be dissatisfied with. Venus is a planet of choice, and if we choose to get a new haircut during Venus retrograde, that period of time when Venus is going backwards in the sky, if we get a new haircut during Venus retrograde, we will walk out of that salon and go, oh my God, what have I just done? This looks hideous. If we get married during this time, we are essentially setting up the chart of a new beginning with somebody, a new committed relationship in a marriage sense with somebody under Venus retrograde, where all those internalized retrograde feelings and emotions and difficulties are embodied in that new relationship, in that marriage. And so you do not want to go into a marriage under that energy. Starting that new life together under the energy of Venus retrograde is not a wise thing to do if you know about it. Sometimes we get married before we know about astrology, and that's too late, we just have to roll with those punches. But if we know about it, then, by all means, do not get married during Venus retrograde. Don't start new love, because it's the same. It will be under the influence of that retrograde internalized Venusian energy with its unlovableness and its feelings of unacceptableness, which is, nobody wants that in a love relationship. We can also find during a Venus retrograde period that we might tend to find old lovers coming back and reconnecting with us. Just know that if that happens, it's not going to last, okay? Just say some dude from high school comes back into your life and you haven't seen him for 20 years and heart's all aflutter. Just know it's probably going to be an experience to last the duration of the Venus retrograde, and then that's all over, Red Rover. Things that come back to us during Venus retrograde are unlikely to last. New loves are unlikely to last. But on the positive side, breakups that occur during Venus retrograde. Just say you've got a fabulous relationship. For some reason, you have a blowout and you think it's all done. Know that if you have an argument and you think the relationship's done for during Venus retrograde, when Venus turns direct, it's likely to be restored again. You're likely to get it back. It's what happens in Venus retrograde relationally is not likely to last. And that's why we avoid starting new love, getting married, getting a new haircut, or getting cosmetic surgery. It won't go well during Venus retrograde generally. And we wait till Venus is direct. But anything like a breakup or an argument or something in relationships during this time that you think has ended everything, it's the opposite. It's not going to mean the end of the relationship forever. It will come back and be restored. So let's take a little peek then at what it means to have Venus in Gemini generally, and then I'm going to walk through each sign and what it looks like to have Venus doing a retrograde motion and how that might affect us. Not for everybody, depends on your own natal chart, how many planets you have in Gemini, and what aspects you've got to planets in Gemini or aspects to the sign of Gemini that can influence how this works for you. But generally, we'll take a look at what might play out in each sign. But Venus in Gemini it's when you've got Venus in Gemini and you're born with Venus in Gemini, you're going to have a connection that's based on communication. That's what you want in your relationships and friendships and your networking. You want connection that's coming from good communication, good talking, lots of conversation. So you're going to have a desire to have love relationships that have lots of conversation in them. And also Gemini is very playful. It's the court jester archetype. So you're going to want to have relationships where there's a playful element, a game-playing element, not a destructive game-playing element. Nobody wants to be with someone who sort of plays mind games and that's kind of sort of rubbish. But being in a relationship where it's fun, where it's joyful, where you're cheeky and you're playful and you flirt and, there's lots of innuendo and that sort of thing that makes it quite tantalizing, those sorts of relationships where it's playful. And you're going to want to be with partners who are intelligent as well. You're going to want an intellectual, intelligent kind of relationship. Not the sort of deep intellectual relationship you might get with sort of the Jupiterian influence or Sagittarian, ninth house kind of influence, but much more did you hear what happened today? And let's watch the news and see what happened here. And you just want to know about everything and be where the action is. There's light breezy quality to the intellect here. It's not sort of bogged down with weighty tomes all about some heavy-duty subject. It's much more light and interested in many different varied things. And so you're going to be drawn to people with an intellect of that nature. Curious. It's also a mutable sign. So when you've got Venus here, natally, you're going to be very changeable in relationship. Now, what's interesting, when a Gemini Venus person is dating, they might chop and change because they want to try everything out. They're like a kid in the candy store this incarnation with their relationship. So they're trying out different, what's it like to date a girl like this? What's it like to date a boy like this? And lots of finding out about things. But when they commit to someone, when they decide, you're the one I want to be with, then they are very loving and loyal types of people. So don't be afraid to date a Gemini Venus person because they can, like I said, if they choose to be with you, they will be very loving and very loyal. Now, that mutable element will give a changeable quality to a Venus in Gemini type of person. And so they might like a lot of action or, interesting things to be happening in the relationship. It's not very settled. It's, let's go here one day. Let's go for a trip here. Let's explore this. Let's, very, very changeable and interesting, wanting to be part of the action everywhere in terms of the relationship itself. Boredom in relationship with a mutable sign just won't cut it. They like change, and if something gets too stagnant, they want to move on. Sexually, they're also going to be a bit like a child on Christmas morning too. So if you're in a relationship with a Gemini Venus person, you might be very lucky and get to play a lot of games and explore a lot of playfulness and try new things. Venus in Gemini people like to try new things in the bedroom. So that could be very exciting and fun if you're so inclined. Very loving people, as I said. Men with Venus in Gemini are going to tend to look for women who, or be drawn to or attracted to women who like to talk or like to teach or in some sort of business. Maybe they present something for a living. I'm actually dating someone with Venus in Gemini, and what do I do for a living? I present information, I teach online, so there you go. And women with Venus in the sign of Gemini, they enjoy friendships with other women that are also people who like to talk, like to communicate, like to have conversations, like to go, to lectures together or be social together, network with others together. So it's very much, as a woman with this in your chart, you'll be drawn to these sorts of friendships with other women. And pleasure for people with Venus in Gemini comes from writing, comes from speaking, comes from teaching, comes from maybe running a small business even. You'll get a lot of delight out of these things when you have Venus in Gemini. You're even, depending on which sign, which house it falls in, you might even find that your hobby is writing. Your hobby is to read even. These sorts of things. You might have a career in these sorts of things and you'll love it. You'll be passionate about it, you'll enjoy it because Venus is our pleasure, what we delight in. Now, selling and sales is also going to be something that you'll be good at if you carry this placement in your natal chart. Selling and sales, you're going to thrive with this. You'll have a very pleasant approach to being a salesman or a saleswoman, and you'll be able to sort of charm people into buying your product. You're likely to be quite successful with selling and sales when you have Venus in the sign of Gemini. So I just wanted to touch on that because it's interesting to explore the whole gamut, you know, what it means to have Venus retrograde, what it means to have Venus in Gemini. And when we put them all together, then we get a full picture of what it's going to be like. All these things I've just described, when Venus goes retrograde, next year in 2020, what I've just described Venus in Gemini to be like is going to really play out for all of us, you know. We will probably, during this time when Venus is retrograde in Gemini, all enjoy having more conversations with partners, and our love relationships will take on more of a tone of conversation and interaction in a communicative sense. We might be feeling more sexually playful during this Venus retrograde period as well, just like people who are born with Venus in Gemini are. We might want to be like a child on Christmas morning and unwrap every sexual gift under the tree, you know. So let's go for it, everybody, during this time. We might be someone who's very stayed in our types of relationships and even almost a bit stagnant and stuck. Along comes Venus retrograde in Gemini. Suddenly we like to mix things up a bit. We like a bit of change. We might like a bit of travel. We might find that we're a bit bored in relationship and we want to inject some fuel into, some breeziness, some lightness, some experimentation into our relationship. So all these qualities I've just listed for Venus in Gemini are likely to play out on the larger scale during this extended period of time that Venus is in Gemini throughout 2020. Now, a really interesting phenomenon that's going to occur at the time that Venus is retrograde is the disappearance of Venus, or the disappearance of Venus as the evening star and the re-emergence of Venus as the morning star. This doesn't have to happen during a retrograde season of Venus, but that's when it will be occurring in 2020. So let me explain how this is going to work. Up until Venus decides to go retrograde, Venus will be traveling ahead of the Sun. So as you can see, the Sun will be here in Taurus just at the time Venus goes retrograde in the 13th of May, and Venus will be here at 21 degrees, as we established before. Now, what this looks like, pretend this is the horizon line running the whole way across. When the Sun is below the sky, it's nighttime. When below the horizon, it's nighttime. Above the horizon is in the daytime. Now, as you can see, as the signs rise on the horizon, up comes the Sun. Boom, there he is in the sky. Venus also rises, but she's not visible during the day because the Sun is so bright in the sky, and he consumes and sucks away all the other heavenly bodies in the glare that he brings throughout the day. There is the Sun traveling through the sky, and we're getting now towards evening. I'm just going to take my arrow, move my horizon line over here for you so it makes sense. And then the Sun sets, goes below the horizon, disappears. But who is still in the sky? Venus. And it's at this point that she appears in the sky as the evening star. She is visible because the Sun has dipped below the horizon and the sky is turning dark, yet she is still out there being seen by the world. So she remains as this evening star until she herself also dips below the horizon too. Now, as we're going into this Venus retrograde period, Venus is going to start traveling backwards, back to about here, while the Sun is traveling forwards. And it's about at this point the two of them are going to meet, and Venus will become what we call Kesenya. You sucked into the Sun's glare and therefore invisible in the sky at all. Invisible as the evening star, and also will be invisible as the morning star. She will not be seen. And this will be happening on the 4th of June 2020 at 13 degrees of Gemini. Then the Sun is going to continue to move forward and Venus is going to continue to move backwards. And when there's about 8 degrees between them, because once a planet is within roughly 8 degrees of the Sun, it gets swallowed up in the glare and becomes invisible. Once they've moved to a point where they're about 8 degrees apart, then what happens as the signs keep turning with the Earth's rotation, Venus ends up rising above the horizon before the Sun. And therefore she becomes the morning star, visible now in the early hours before the Sun rises. There she is as the morning star. She is in the upper sky, the sky that we can see above us, and the Sun is still in the sky, but below us where we can't see him until eventually, boom, he rises and she disappears as the morning star. And then so on. And as you can see, when it gets to evening and the setting, Venus disappears, no longer visible, and then the Sun goes down. There's no evening star showing. So I hope that helps explain the change from the evening star to morning star that's going to occur when Venus is in her retrograde motion. So this will be quite a significant period. Venus will be combust with the Sun on the 13th. Some refer to it as Kesenya on the 13th, on the 4th of June at 13 degrees, exactly conjunct with the Sun. And there's a really interesting mythology around this process that I'm quite excited actually to share with you. Now, Lucifer is the Latin name for Venus, interestingly enough, according to Wikipedia. I was so fascinated to read this. He was known as the light bringer. And now Phosphorus was the other name for him as the morning star. And there's biblical references to him being the morning star, which we know occurs after Venus has been combust. When Venus is the evening star, so it's Phosphorus when, I hope I'm saying that right. Yeah, Phosphorus when she's the Luciferian evening star, morning star, and Hesperus as Lucifer, the evening star. Now, in classical mythology, Lucifer was the son of the gods Aurora, which is the morning, the dawn, and now I hope I say this right, I'm not overly brilliant with my mythological names, Cephalus. Sounds a bit like a disease, doesn't it? So Lucifer was the son of the gods Aurora and Cephalus, and he was often presented, I'm reading here from my notes, presented in ancient poetry as the herald of the dawn, hence his association with that morning star that appears. Every year Venus, as we know, I've just described, disappears from the sky by getting too close to the Sun, swallowed up in the Sun's glare, and then emerges roughly 8 weeks later as the evening star. And it's from this astronomical phenomenon that we get the ancient mythological story of Lucifer, who is described as the morning star falling from the heavens. And this was picked up by Christianity, which described Lucifer as the angel that tried to be like God. Remember this? The Sun is like it's the center of the solar system. It's the god from whom all the other minor gods, Jupiter and Saturn and so forth, circle around. This is the center of it all. And it also, the Sun is correlated to our ego. The story of Lucifer represents Lucifer coming into God's presence and challenging God, saying, I can be as good as God. This is the biblical association that's supposed to be there. Lucifer is the angel of ego and saying, I can be as good as God. Now, what is often left out of this ancient mythology is that Lucifer was restored once more, was forgiven and taken back into the presence of God. And this correlates so beautifully with the story here that we see playing out in the heavens. Lucifer, the angel that fell from the heavens, just like Venus disappears and then becomes the morning star. So falling from heaven, being restored and returned, and there is Venus becoming the morning star, forgiven, allowed back in the heavens once more. So I was absolutely captivated by this ancient mythology and the correlation of Lucifer to the star Venus. Obviously, the five-pointed star, if you get into Luciferianism and that sort of thing, there's a correlation there too. But it is actually quite a beautiful story of restoration, of forgiveness, of love, of, our ego trying to overtake us. And, we fall from God's presence because of our ego. And then God in his grace and goodness restoring us back to wholeness and presence through this beautiful interaction in the sky and this mythology that we see with the ancient story of Lucifer correlating to Venus. I find that absolutely beautiful. Lucifer returns as the morning star, forgiven, and so much grace is in this beautiful, beautiful story. So when you see this unfolding in the sky next May, June, remember this story of forgiveness and returning to wholeness that we see playing out with the disappearance of Venus and the re-emergence as the morning star. I wanted to talk about that because it will be part of this retrograde experience. It's going to be quite a fabulous retrograde experience on many levels, and in this case, the restoration and the forgiveness that Venus represents. In fact, Venus does rule forgiveness as planetary rulerships go. Okay, so let's conclude now by having a very brief run through of what it means to have Venus retrograde in all the houses. So let's start with Gemini, who's having this particular retrograde experience. Well, as everything that I described as being somewhat of a challenge for people with Venus retrograde natally, these are going to be some of your issues that you want to watch out for. As I said, don't go getting married, don't go getting any beauty treatments, don't get your hair cut, that sort of thing. Just go easy around Venus retrograde. It doesn't last very long. It'll be over before you know it. But you might find that at this time you are experiencing feeling unacceptable, feeling unlovable. Even worst case scenario, things can bubble up in you where you feel a bit self-centered. It's all about me. But remember, this is often a defense against these feelings of unlovableness that might be present. So for you Gemini rising people, that is possibly the experience that you might have a little while Venus is retrograde in your sign. Now, if we are Taurus rising, I'm going to go backwards this time. Gemini happens to fall in the second house for you guys. And what this means is that there can be sort of a sense of internal insecurity in you, where things don't, you're not feeling very safe or solid with regard to your finances during Venus retrograde in your second house. So you can become a bit panicky about financial security during this time. There might be in a fear of some sort of loss, or even a fear of rejection, because remember, the second house is the house of self-love. And so this fear of rejection can be present during Venus retrograde for you guys as well. And now I'm just going to whiz through these very, very quickly. We're going to look at Aries. Aries is the third house. Aries is the first house. Gemini and retrograde Venus in Gemini is in the third house. You're going to want and crave peace in your environment during this time. To be no quarrels, no arguments, no contention. If you find that that's occurring, it's really going to unravel you and unnerve you during Venus retrograde. You're going to strive for peace, and it's very important that you have this in your environment when you have Venus retrograding in your third house. So do all you can to make your home environment, your business environment as well, with full of gentle communications, not argy-bargy, not fights, not quarrels. Very important when Venus is retrograde in your third house for you Aries rising people. For Pisces rising people, this is falling in the fourth house. You also will like to have some sort of peace and tranquility in your home environment, in your immediate, like even in your community as well. No fighting, no arguing. Remember, this is the sign of communications. Venus retrograde here is going to desire pleasurable communications. You're probably going to crave reassurance and loving reassurance from your family as well. So you could create situations where you can receive this, but note that for you Piscean rising people, this includes me, the bubbling up that occurs in you during this time might be, gosh, I just wish I had an approving word from my family. I wish I had their love. You might be longing for this at this time. Also, we can tend to want to, entertain people in our home because Gemini, one of the archetypes for Gemini is the entertainer, the joker, the court jester. We can want to entertain people in our home, but usually if we do so, it's going to be coming from a place within us to do with seeking that approval while Venus is retrograde here. So we might want to have pleasure and entertaining and so forth in our home, but it's because we want people to like us. We want people to approve of us and make us feel that we're valuable and worthwhile. Remember, those qualities of Venus retrograde can be this unlovableness, and we're seeking to rectify that through our home environment when we have Pisces rising. During Venus retrograde, if you are an Aquarius rising person, well, this is falling for you guys in the fifth house, this Venus retrograde process. When this is occurring, we can feel very hesitant to open our heart to love during Venus retrograde. This is the house of love, and Venus retrograde makes us hesitant and fearful about doing that. That's going to be the case for Aquarius rising people, particularly single Aquarius rising people. We might really be reluctant to enter into the dating game or something like that during Venus retrograde. So there's quite a bit of internal insecurity and lack of self-confidence. This is a house also correlated with our self-esteem and self-confidence. So that can be a bit thwarted with Venus retrograde as well. So be aware that that might bubble up in you. Even if you're in a relationship, you might start to feel a little bit unconfident in the relationship itself, which just know it will pass as Venus retrograde concludes. Okay, Capricorn rising people has Venus retrograde falling in the sixth house. What this will tend to bring on an individual level depends also what's in your chart, but you can undervalue yourself. Venus is our sense of self-value and self-worth, and here in the sixth house of work and contribution, it's also the house of service, connected also to poverty and disease and misfortunes of that nature. We can actually undervalue our work. We can be insecure about our work, feeling that anything that we try and do is just not good enough. Remember, this is also connected to the idea of perfectionism in the sixth house. So Venus retrograde here can make our self-worth based on a need to be perfect, and of course nobody's perfect. And so we're never good enough. We don't quite measure up. We can't do what other people do, and we get these sorts of feelings within us of not being good enough, not being perfect enough. So Capricorn people, if you find that occurring during Venus retrograde, just know it's a response to the energy, and it's not the truth. It's not the reality at the core of who you are. Sagittarius rising people puts this energy in the seventh house, and when we have Venus retrograding in the seventh house, we might find that our relationships become a little bit unconventional. So that can be existing committed partnerships or new committed partnerships. As I said, it's not a good idea to start new committed partnerships during Venus retrograde. But if, say, you've been, in a new relationship for about 2 or 3 weeks before Venus went retrograde, suddenly the nature of that relationship can become very unconventional. I want to remind you that we get what we think we deserve in relationships. So our deservability with relationships might be impacting what we are receiving. We might have this unconventional relationship, maybe a long distance relationship, maybe a relationship that's really odd and left of center in some way. But it may very well be during Venus retrograde that we're getting what we think we actually deserve. And of course, Venus is self-esteem. So if your self-esteem is low during this time, then relationships can tend to sort of be damaging to self-esteem. So start to work on your self-esteem before Venus goes retrograde. Buoy yourself up by reading good spiritual books and doing what you need to feel that sense of self-worth and self-value. And then when Venus retrograde hits, it won't matter what your partner says. It won't matter what your partner does or this new relationship that you've been in for a short period of time or whatever. It won't really matter because your sense of self-worth will be buoyant enough to flow through the Venus retrograde period. If we are Scorpio rising, well, this is happening for us in the 8th house. Lots of action here in the 8th house for you guys next year, Scorpio rising people. And the 8th house, is really important that we understand the nature of the 8th house with this retrograde motion. It is a house of obsession. So our obsessive levels in relationship can go a bit off the Richter scale while Venus is retrograding in our 8th house. When Venus is retrograde in our 8th house, that's when we can sort of worst case scenario, become a bit of a stalker, even if that's just online, looking online all the time and what are they doing on Facebook, that sort of stuff. Just watch out for that sort of behavior, the jealousies, the obsessions when Venus is retrograde. It can become almost all-consuming during Venus retrograde, where all you can do is think about that person. You're just breathing that person. You must be around them all the time. I'm a huge fan of Flight of the Conchords, and think of Mel, the character in Flight of the Conchords, if you know that show, who is just always hanging around and pops up out of nowhere all the time because she's been spying on the two guys in the band, Jermaine and Brett. So this is what we're looking at. You want to just picture Mel during Venus retrograde in your 8th house and think, I'm not Mel. I am not Mel. Channel that energy. You want to be a bit lighter with these things, not so in your head with the mental obsessions now. And also watch your finances, because this is a financial house, a house of receiving money from others, inheritances, wills, and so forth. And of course, Venus rules money. Here in the 8th house going retrograde, it could mean there could be problems with finances, problems with wills. So you might like to sort of dot your I's and cross your T's prior to the Venus going retrograde in those realms. Make sure they're all sorted before the retrograde starts. Okay, if we are Libra rising, well, that is putting Gemini energy, retrograde Venus energy into the 9th house. And this can mean that we might feel a sense of unease, or like we're not quite fitting in with somebody from another culture or a different belief system. There's a dis-ease. Remember, when Venus is retrograde, one of the qualities that it imparts is this sense of not feeling good enough, not feeling lovable, not belonging, not fitting in. And so Venus retrograde in the house connected with other cultures, overseas, other belief systems, we feel like we're not fitting in during Venus retrograde. Maybe we're interested in exploring a different culture or religion or whatever, and we're very interested, but we just don't fit. So for you guys, Libra rising, it's actually not a good time to go and explore new beliefs. It's not a good time to go and explore new religions when Venus is going backwards in the sky, because whatever you explore will not last. You won't be sort of gelling with it. You won't feel like you fit or like you belong with those sorts of things. If you really want to get the most out of your exploration of other belief systems and other cultures and so on, then by all means do it when Venus is direct, and you'll probably receive a lot more intuition and downloads and wisdom that you can utilize when Venus is going direct. If we happen to be Virgo rising, well, this is falling in our 10th house if we're Virgo rising. And this can mean that we can be a little bit shy and self-conscious in our career, in our workplace, just during the time of Venus retrograde. And so we can need to be really careful, if we're Virgo rising, of our bosses taking advantage of us during this time, during Venus retrograde. You know, any work that we're doing now, don't look for recognition. Don't look for monetary reward during Venus retrograde from our career. You know, just do the work, do the planning, keep plodding along during Venus retrograde with your career, and know that the recognition and the benefit won't probably manifest for you until a little later down the track after Venus goes direct. Now for Leo rising people, this is your 11th house. And when we have Venus retrograding in our 11th house, it means that we perhaps struggle with the group situation more than we usually would. We feel when Venus is retrograde in the house of friendship and large social groups, we feel like it's not really working. You know, I don't want to be here in this large group. This is too overwhelming for me right now. Even if ordinarily we're the life of the party, when Venus is retrograde, those sorts of large group activities can feel a little bit uncomfortable for Leo people, which is very unusual. Most Leo people like to be the center of attention and be seen and so forth. But when Venus is retrograding in your 11th house, heads up, it can be a little bit feel at odds to be in front of the group, or you know, even connecting in a large group situation. We much prefer when Venus is retrograde connecting one-on-one and having those intimate conversations. So by all means, chase those things up. You know, go out for coffee with a friend and talk one-on-one, those sorts of things. But don't be seeking that kind of big here I am, look at me in a group situation kind of thing. It'll feel too difficult and awkward when Venus is retrograde in your 11th house. And finally, Cancer. Well, of course, we've reached the end, and this means that Gemini will be retrograding for Cancer people in the 12th house. For you guys, for Cancer rising people, this can be a very karmic time when people from the past come back and enter into your life for a purpose. Probably not of a permanent nature, but people from the past, could be a past life even, might return into your life to teach you something, to heal something, to address some karmic wounding with regard to relationships, love, self-love, beauty, these kinds of things. So it could be very karmic, the experiences that you have during this Venus retrograde period. Also, watch out for victimhood. Setting yourself up as a bit of a victim. Unfortunately, the 12th house has associations for that, and with the sort of the loss of self-love that occurs when Venus is retrograde, then that victimhood can tend to sort of take a front seat, and you might sort of, oh, woe is me and nobody loves me, that kind of stuff. Be wary of that, and when you see it sort of cropping up in your thought processes or your internal dialogue, you'll know, hey, Venus retrograde, okay, not going to go there. Not going to go down that rabbit hole. Let me go read a book instead or something. Do something to distract your mind from going down that rabbit hole of victimhood. And so that is our journey through Gemini retrograde Venus for 2020. We've covered a lot of information here. I do hope it wasn't too disjointed for you and that you could follow along. I did want to cover so much of this really important, precious time that's going to be unfolding for us all. There's so much that we can learn through Venus retrograde periods, and it's designed, the purpose of Venus retrograde periods are designed to help us go within, explore our relationship attitudes and beliefs, and emerge out the other side reborn, forgiven and renewed, like the story in the mythology of Lucifer, renewed and ready to shine like the morning star. So thanks so much for joining me, and do enjoy all the rest of the wonderful videos that have been prepared for this really special season on Astrolata. Thank you and God bless.